Hello fellow warriors, this is Dao Paleo and I'm Rokas Balčiūnas, and today we'll have a lesson about Parry. What's that? So first of all, I want to show you the distance, and the distance is the most important part of the defense. I was wondering what to put into this video about the parries, maybe just the direction, maybe just the parries, but the more I thought about it, the more I could not get rid of explaining the parries without explaining the whole tactics of the defense, and that's how all the content, what I wanted to mention, will be split into two videos and explained in more detail. So first of all, the first line of defense is actually not the parry. The defense from the spear is your counterattack. So when you are standing with a spear against the opponent, the most important part, the best way to defend yourself is to always be vigilant, always be prepared to strike whenever you see the opening. So therefore, the direction of the spear is important, and it always has to be directed towards the opponent and keeping them at bay. This is actually how spear defends. It is a long stick keeping your enemies at bay. So it started not as a weapon, as a war weapon. It started as a hunting tool to hunt large prey, and therefore you have to be prepared to stab large prey, be it bear or some other large animal, and therefore you have to be very powerful and be always prepared to stab whenever you need and whenever you see the opening. So since it is just straight stab whenever it's an opening, then the distance becomes very, very important. So usually the strike, and the most damaging strike, so the most damaging strike would be to the torso and to the neck, not especially to the head, though of course if we have a broad head that could cause damage, but the most lethal wounds would be to the neck and to the soft tissue in the torso. So when you are fighting or at an attack distance, it is very important to keep the correct distance. Whenever you can strike, whenever you can attack and thrust, the opponent can also. Of course, if you have a longer spear, the opponent has shorter spear, of course you can attack when the opponent is still not in range, and then we have this race of the lengthening of the spear taking place. When it reaches several meters of length, if we consider pikes in the ancient times already. But when you're looking into the spear that is practical in use, being that you can carry it with yourself, the spear that would be not much longer than the height of the person would be still practical. If it is shorter, of course, you could just impale yourself if you fall. If it is very, very long, it is cumbersome and it's difficult to carry, especially in the woods. So the distance is so as that you can reach with one step and come back. So this is usually it's called in measure or the measure, and it is the distance where it is just enough to have one full, actually half step to touch, or in this case, thrust to the target. So that is the correct distance. So if you are closer and it's just enough for the hands to reach the target, you are also at danger of the opponent being thrusted, because it's the same for the opponent. He, she can also just move the hands and thrust you. So you have to be at the distance where you and the opponent has to take one step to thrust. Now, of course, we could start further, and further it is not enough, the distance is not enough to reach the target, so I have to make either larger step or step and then thrust. So each of these is additional movement which would telegraph for the opponent that the attack is taking place and therefore prepare to defend. So good distance and keeping the spear directed towards the opponent are two first principles two most important principles of the defense against the spear. Now, of course, the spear is direct thrust, so it takes very short, very narrow opening to be able to penetrate and cause damage. But at the same time, since it's very simple attack, it is also very simple to defend. So the spear, the direction of the spear is straight, and all the force is straight. So any sideways movement, even the slightest one, it doesn't matter how strong and how fast the spear is moving, the slightest push to the side would deviate from the path. That is pure physics. So perpendicular forces will always deviate the path of an object. So the same can be applied for the thrust of the spear. Any small movement would deviate the spear from the path, and the spear would not land in the opening, or maybe would miss the target altogether. So that's where the parries What parries? Okay, sorry. Parries come in. So there generally are 4 angles, 4 directions of the parry. So if I'm standing on the line, so this is the middle, so I have an upper side, lower side, so outer side, inner side. So I have 4 directions where I can parry the thrust. So if thrust is moving directly to me, I can choose which direction I can parry, especially if it's moving directly to my center, to the center line, to the abdomen here. So I can either parry it to the upper left, upper right, lower right, and lower left and lower right. But if the attack is coming, for example, to the neck, head, or upper side of the chest, then there are 2 directions where I can parry. Either I can parry to one side, so just the same, remember we had the same movement, the same strike. So in this case, I can just place it up, not striking, actually just placing up, and having this A shape, and therefore the parry would go just past me. So be always careful to have correct position. So if I'm not parrying wide enough, the strike can still land somewhere and injure me. So it has to be like a half of the roof. So the same would be to another direction. I can parry here. So from this end, I can parry here. Be careful not to stick your elbow out, because it can also be a target. Then, if the strike goes to the lower part of the body, either to the knee, or it actually be to the groin, because there are a lot of arteries there, so I can parry as before, here as a V shape, and as a V shape here. So these 4 directions can give me the parry to one or the other direction. So like an A shape here, or like a V shape here. Now there's one additional parry that can happen, and is this. So I can parry to the outside from the inside, but with not using the strike that we learned, but very short one, parrying here. So I can parry here just by moving up. I can parry here just by moving up. I can parry here moving down. And I can parry here moving down. And I can parry here. Now, also, I could use the motion to just push away or just strike to the incoming spear and parry it this way. So I just move it and strike to the side, move it and strike to that side, or move it, strike to that side, or in this case it's more difficult moving here and striking to that side. So it depends at which distance you engage the incoming spear. So for example, if I just happen to open up, there's the strike coming towards me, I can just block it and parry it and move it here. Now, mentioning the block, actually there's no block for the thrust. I cannot just stop it unless, of course, I have a shield, which is something that we will cover later. So I cannot block it, I cannot stop the strike. The only thing I can do is parry. Okay, so now when we have already parried here or here, the question is whether I should stay on the line or should I move away from the line? And that is a very good question because both have advantages and disadvantages. So the quickest way is I just raise the hands and parry, and that's it. And it also could be just moving and just parrying here, standing on the line. So if I have more weight on the back leg, it is very difficult to move that leg somewhere from the line. And it is impractical to move the front foot from the line because you just don't step away from the line. You're still on the line of attack. It is only practical if you move the back leg a bit from the line. So only then you can move away from the attack. So in this case, if you have weight more on the back foot, it is very difficult to move it fast because you have to move the weight to the front. So therefore, in that case, it's better to parry and use that force to strike. Now, if you are, the same would be to the lower side, so if you just parry and strike. Now, if you have a bit more weight on the front leg, for example, you have thrusted, and you have a bit more weight on the front leg, and you have to parry, of course, it's better to move away from the line. Because if you move away from the line here or here, so if you move away, you move away from the attack. And even if you are close and you're don't manage to stop or parry or push away the attack, then it still would pass aside and then wouldn't injure you. So you could move away to this side here, so at an angle. You could move away to this side here at an angle. You could move away to this side here, and you could move away even here. So there are still 4 possibilities. Of course, some of them are easier than the others, but you have possibility. Either you want to move to that direction, or you want to move to that direction, or you want to move to this direction, or you want to move to this direction. So be careful not to move away at perpendicular angles because you are just opening up for second attack. And the same would be here, too far. So no more than 45 degrees, sometimes even less is enough, especially if you're moving to your outside here, because you can just make your profile a bit smaller. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention is the counter-attack. It's already some sort of a tactics, because when you have parried, the person attacking you is already in measure. It's already within your striking distance. So, for example, if I just thrusted, and in this point, of course, I have to move back because I am at a distance for the counter-attack, so I have to move back. But if the opponent is not does not counter-strike, of course, I don't have to move back. I can be here and just thrust and stab and stab and stab.
Stab.
Ow!
Stab.
Stop.
Stab.
Guards!
Stab.
Guards!
What are you stabbing? Stab.
Ow!
Stab.
Ow!
Stab.
Ow!
So therefore, the opponent has to force me to move back. So therefore, I have to strike and then come back. Attack and come back. Attack and come back. And for this, I have to anticipate a counterattack. I have to think and be fearful of the counterattack of the opponent. So therefore, whenever I have parried the strike, the thrust, I counter-strike directly. I just parry and counter-strike. So whenever, even if you're moving away from the line, that's why it's best moving with your rear foot, because when you step from the rear foot, you can use that force to counter-strike. The same here and counter-strike. The same here, and you could strike or thrust. And the same here or here and thrust. So whenever, even if you're standing on the line, you just parry it and strike. The parry can be small, but the counter strike should be enough. You don't have to move to the direction of the person, because if you have parried, he's already at your distance. You just have to stretch your hands, and you would be already reaching the opponent. So these are few important notes about defense against the thrust. So there are a lot more to tell about the defense and the use of the strikes in the attack, but the basic principles of keeping distance, keeping the opponent at bay, always targeted without the opening, and of course using all of the directions, and after each parry preparing to counter strike and using the opening that the opponent creates are the key important points in the defense against the two-handed spear. So thank you for watching, and we'll be in touch. See you.